I didn't think slipping on a wet floor could change my life, but the moment my head hit the ground, everything went black, and when I opened my eyes again, the first face I saw was his. Zane. And somehow, that made everything worse, and better at the same time. It happened on a random Tuesday. Nothing special about it. I'd stayed late at work, rushing to finish something my boss dumped on me last minute. By the time I left, the building was almost empty, the kind of quiet that makes every footstep echo louder than it should. I remember texting someone, probably half distracted, while walking through the lobby. Big mistake. The cleaning crew had just mopped the floor, but the warning sign? Yeah, it was off to the side, barely visible. My foot hit the tile, slid out from under me, and the next thing I knew, I was falling hard. The crack when my head hit? I still hear it sometimes. Then nothing. Just darkness. When I came to, everything felt distant. Like I was underwater or something. My ears were ringing, my vision blurry, and I couldn't tell how much time had passed. But I remember his voice before I could even see clearly. Tony, hey, can you hear me? Zane. Out of everyone who could have been there, it was him. I blinked a few times, trying to focus, and his face slowly came into view above me. His brows were pulled tight, eyes scanning me like he was trying to piece me back together. Stay still, he said, one hand hovering near my shoulder, like he didn't want to touch me too suddenly. You hit your head pretty hard. I groaned, trying to sit up anyway. I'm fine. I wasn't. The second I moved, the room spun so fast I thought I was gonna throw up. My stomach twisted, and I grabbed onto his arm without even thinking. That's when he finally touched me properly. Firm. Steady. Tony, he said again, lower this time, almost like a warning. Don't move. There was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Not teasing. Not casual. Serious. Zane and we weren't exactly close. Same building, same general circle, sometimes we'd talk, sometimes we'd grab a drink with mutual friends. He was the kind of guy everyone liked without really trying. Confident without being arrogant. Always relaxed. Too relaxed. At least, that's how he always seemed. But right now, he looked anything but. I'm calling an ambulance, he said, already reaching for his phone. No, don't. I started, but my voice came out weaker than I expected. He ignored me. Of course he did. Typical Zane. I let my head fall back against the floor, staring up at the ceiling lights that felt way too bright. Everything hurt in this dull, distant way, but what I couldn't ignore was how close he still was. Kneeling beside me. One hand lightly gripping my wrist now, like he was checking my pulse or just grounding me. You're bleeding a little, he muttered, more to himself than to me. Great, I mumbled. He huffed out a quiet breath, almost like a laugh, but not really. Yeah. Real great. There was a pause. And for a second, it was just us. The empty lobby. The faint smell of cleaning chemicals. The hum of fluorescent lights. And his hands still holding onto me. I turned my head slightly, just enough to look at him properly. Why are you even here? He glanced down at me, expression unreadable for a second before he answered. Came back for my jacket. Of course he did. Lucky me, I said weakly. That actually got a small smile out of him. But it didn't last long. His grip tightened just slightly when I shifted again. Hey, stay with me, all right? Something about the way he said it, quiet, but firm, made my chest feel weird. I'm not going anywhere, I muttered. Good, he replied, eyes not leaving mine. Because you scared the hell out of me. That caught me off guard. Zane didn't say things like that. Not seriously. Not like this. For a moment, I just stared at him, trying to figure out if I'd heard him right. But before I could say anything else, the distant sound of sirens started getting closer. He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath this whole time. Help's coming, he said. But he didn't let go of my wrist. Not even for a second. And weirdly, I didn't want him to. Looking back, that was the moment everything shifted. Not the fall. Not the blood. Not even the ambulance. It was the way he looked at me while I was lying there on that cold floor, like I actually mattered. Like losing me, even for a second, wasn't something he was willing to risk. And the worst part? I felt it too. Even then. Even before I understood what it meant. If you've ever read those stories where everything starts with one small moment, one accident, one look, one unexpected touch, yeah. This was mine. And I had no idea how much it was about to change everything. I don't remember getting into the ambulance. I remember flashes, bright lights, voices overlapping, someone asking me questions I could barely process. But the one thing that stayed clear through all of it was Zane. He didn't leave. Even when the paramedics showed up, even when they started checking my head, asking if I knew my name, what day it was, he stayed right there beside me. "Tony, look at me!" His voice cut through everything else. I turned my head slightly, wincing as pain shot through my skull. "I am looking at you." "You sure?" he said, a hint of that usual sarcasm creeping back. But it didn't fully land. There was still tension in his eyes. "Because you look like you're about to pass out again." "I'm fine," I muttered for the 100th time. One of the paramedics glanced at him. "You a friend?" Zane didn't hesitate. "Yeah." Something about how quickly he said it made my chest tighten. They loaded me onto the stretcher, and that's when I finally lost sight of him for a second. It was brief, but I felt it immediately, this weird, sudden drop in my stomach. Like something important just disappeared. Which made no sense. We weren't that close. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But then, as they rolled me toward the ambulance, I heard his voice again. "I'm coming with him." I turned my head just enough to see him arguing, calm, but firm. Typical Zane. He wasn't loud about it, but he wasn't backing down either. And a minute later, he was climbing in, sitting right across from me. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. The ride felt longer than it probably was. Every bump made my head throb, and the paramedic kept shining a light in my eyes, asking me to follow it. I answered what I could, but honestly, I was more aware of Zane than anything else. He hadn't taken his eyes off me. Not once. "You good?" he asked quietly when the paramedic turned away for a second. I gave a small nod. "Yeah, just feel like crap." He huffed lightly. "Yeah, that tracks." There was a pause. Then his hand reached out again, this time more deliberate, and rested against my forearm. Not grabbing. Not checking. Just there. Grounding me. "You're okay," he said, almost under his breath. I don't know if he was saying it for me, or for himself. By the time we got to the hospital, the adrenaline had worn off, and everything hit harder. The lights were too bright. The noise too sharp. My head pounding in a way that made it hard to think straight. They wheeled me into a room, started running tests, asking more questions. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I lost track of time again. But every time I opened my eyes, Zane was still there, leaning against the wall, sitting in the chair, watching me, waiting. At some point, a doctor came in, explained I had a mild concussion, needed rest, monitoring, all that standard stuff. I caught maybe half of it. What I did catch was Zane asking questions. Actual questions. How long should he stay? What should I watch for? Can he be alone tonight? I blinked at him from the bed, slightly out of it but aware enough to register how involved he sounded. This wasn't casual anymore. This wasn't just wrong place, right time. This was something else. When the doctor left, the room finally went quiet. Too quiet. I shifted slightly, wincing again. "You don't have to stay, you know." Zane looked up immediately. "Yeah. I do." I frowned a little. "Why?" He held my gaze for a second, then looked away, running a hand through his hair. "Because," he started then stopped. For once, Zane didn't have an easy answer. And that alone felt strange. "You hit your head, Tony," he said finally, quieter now. "I'm not just gonna leave." I let out a weak breath, staring at the ceiling for a second before looking back at him. "You stayed the whole time?" "Yeah." "Why?" He looked at me again, and this time, he didn't dodge it. Because when you didn't wake up right away, he said slowly, I thought. He cut himself off. But I didn't need him to finish. I could see it in his face. That moment. That fear. And suddenly, everything felt heavier. Realer. Zane, I started, not even sure what I was going to say. But he shook his head slightly, like he didn't want to get into it. Just don't do that again, all right? There it was. Deflection. But softer than usual. Less guarded. I almost smiled. Yeah, I muttered. I'll try not to fall dramatically in public next time. That got a small laugh out of him, finally. And for a second, things felt normal again. But not really. Because underneath it, something had shifted. And we both knew it. They ended up keeping me for observation longer than expected. Which meant one thing I definitely didn't expect. Zane was still there hours later. Still sitting in that same chair. Still watching me like he was making sure I didn't disappear. And somewhere between the pain, the exhaustion, and the way he hadn't left my side, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit yet. This wasn't just about the accident anymore. Not even close. And the moment that really messed with my head was still coming. I woke up to his voice again. Not loud. Not panicked this time. Just close. Tony, hey. I blinked slowly, my head still heavy, like my brain hadn't fully caught up with the fact that I was awake again. The hospital room was dimmer now, lights lowered, quieter than before. Different. How long was I out? I muttered, my voice rough. Zane leaned forward in the chair beside my bed, elbows resting on his knees. Like an hour. Maybe a bit more. I shifted slightly, testing how I felt. Still dizzy. Still sore. But better than before. Feels like I got hit by a truck, I said. Yeah, he replied, watching me carefully. That's about right. There was a pause. Then I noticed it. He looked tired. Not just a little. Actually tired. His hair slightly messier than usual. His posture slouched like he'd been sitting there way longer than he was used to. You've seriously been here the whole time? I asked. He didn't even hesitate. Yeah. I stared at him for a second, trying to process that. Zane, you don't have to. I know. He cut in, calm but firm. I want to. That shut me up. Because again, this wasn't how he usually was. Zane was the guy who showed up, made things fun, kept things light. He wasn't the guy who sat in a hospital room for hours just to make sure someone was okay. At least, I didn't think he was. A nurse came in not long after, checked my vitals, asked a few routine questions, then left us alone again. And the silence that followed? It wasn't awkward. But it wasn't normal either. It felt loaded. Like there was something sitting right between us that neither of us was fully acknowledging yet. I shifted again, this time pushing myself up slightly so I was sitting more upright. You can go home, you know. I'll be fine. Zane didn't move. Didn't even look away. Are you trying to get rid of me? He asked. There was a slight edge to it, but not aggressive. Just something else. I frowned. No, I just... Then stop saying that. Okay. That definitely wasn't his usual tone. I blinked, a little caught off guard. All right, damn. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair again. Sorry. I just... He stopped, jaw tightening slightly. For a second, I thought he was going to brush it off again. But this time, he didn't. I don't like the idea of you being here alone, he said quietly. That hit harder than it should have. Because there was no joke in it. No sarcasm. Just honesty. And I didn't really know what to do with that. Zane, I said after a moment, softer now. We're not that close. The second the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Not because they weren't true, but because of the way his expression shifted. Not angry. Just something else. Something quieter. Yeah, he said, leaning back slightly in the chair. I know. That should have ended the conversation. But it didn't. Because he didn't look away this time. Didn't deflect. Didn't joke. He just kept looking at me. And after a second, he added, "Doesn't mean I don't care." There it was. Simple. Direct. And way too real. I swallowed, suddenly very aware of how fast my heart was beating for someone who was supposed to be resting. "You always like this?" I asked, trying to lighten it just a little. He raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Showing up out of nowhere, acting like you're, I don't know, my personal bodyguard or something." That got a faint smirk out of him. "Only when you're bleeding on the floor." I huffed out a small laugh, shaking my head slightly. "Good to know." Another quiet moment passed. But this one felt different. Easier. Like we'd crossed something without really saying it out loud. I glanced over at him again, more carefully this time. Not just seeing him, but actually looking. The way his sleeves were slightly rolled up, like he hadn't even noticed. The faint tension still in his shoulders. The way his eyes kept flicking back to me, like he was checking, again and again, that I was still okay. "You were really that worried?" I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer right away. And for a second, I thought maybe I'd pushed too far. But then he leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his thighs again. "When you didn't move," he started, then paused, choosing his words more carefully this time. "Yeah. Just that. Yeah. No exaggeration. No drama. But somehow, it said everything." I looked away first. Because holding eye contact suddenly felt like too much. "Hey," he said after a second. I glanced back at him. "Yeah? You scared me, Tony." There it was again. That same honesty. And this time, he didn't soften it. Didn't hide it behind anything. I felt something shift in my chest. Slow. Subtle. But undeniable. "I didn't mean to," I said quietly. "I know." Another pause. Then softer. "Still did." I don't know how long we sat there like that. Talking a little. Sitting in silence a little more. But at some point, exhaustion caught up to me again. My eyes kept closing, my body too heavy to fight it. "Get some sleep," Zane said, his voice lower now. I nodded slightly, already drifting. But right before I fully passed out, I felt it again. His hand. Lightly resting against mine this time. Not grabbing. Not checking. Just there. And for some reason, that was the thing that stayed with me the most. Because when I woke up again later that night, he still hadn't moved. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a one-time thing. Zane wasn't just the guy who found me after the accident. He was the guy who stayed. And I had no idea what that meant yet. But I was starting to feel it. Whether I wanted to or not. I woke up in the middle of the night, and for a second I forgot where I was. It was quiet. Too quiet. Not the kind of silence you get at home, but that sterile, heavy hospital silence. Machines humming softly, distant footsteps in the hallway, the faint glow of lights that never really turn off. My head still hurt, but it wasn't as sharp anymore. Just this dull, constant pressure. I shifted slightly, blinking the sleep out of my eyes. And then I saw him. Zane was still there. Same chair. Same position, more or less. Except now he was leaned back, head tilted slightly to the side, eyes closed. Asleep. That caught me off guard. I don't know why, but something about seeing him like that, completely still, guard down for once, felt different. More real. Less like the version of him everyone else saw. I studied him for a second longer than I probably should have. The tension that had been in his face earlier? Gone. His breathing slow, steady. One arm resting loosely on the armrest, the other still close to the bed. Close to me? Like even in his sleep, he didn't want to be too far. Something about that made my chest tighten. In a way I didn't fully understand yet. I shifted again, more carefully this time. But even that small movement was enough. His eyes opened almost instantly. "Tony?" His voice was rough with sleep, but alert in a second. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm up." He straightened in the chair, running a hand over his face like he was trying to wake himself up properly. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah. I think so." He leaned forward immediately, like he needed to see for himself. Any dizziness? Nausea? I almost smiled. Relax, doctor, I muttered. I'm not dying. Not funny, he shot back, but there was no real bite to it. Still, he didn't look convinced. His eyes stayed on me a second longer, scanning, checking. Only when he seemed satisfied did he finally lean back again. You fell asleep, I said. He let out a quiet breath. Yeah. Guess I did. How long? Not long. I raised an eyebrow. You don't even know, do you? He smirked faintly. Does it matter? I shrugged slightly. Just didn't think you were the type to crash in a hospital chair. Yeah, he said, glancing at the floor for a second. Neither did I. There was something in that. Something unspoken. Zane, I said after a moment. He looked back at me immediately. Yeah? Why are you really still here? He didn't answer right away. And this time, he didn't brush it off either. He just sat there for a second, like he was deciding how honest he wanted to be. Because I didn't like how it felt when you weren't responding. Simple. But it hit harder than anything else he'd said so far. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. That's it. He let out a small breath, shaking his head slightly. No, he admitted. There it was. My chest tightened again. He leaned forward a bit, resting his forearms on his thighs, eyes locked on mine. I've seen people get hurt before, he said. It's never great, but this was different. Different how? Another pause. And this one felt heavier. Because it was you. That did it. That was the moment something in my brain stopped trying to downplay everything. Because there was no casual way to say that. No easy way to interpret it. And he didn't look like he was joking. At all. You barely even know me, I said, quieter now. He frowned slightly. That's not true. Zane. I know enough. He cut in. I know you're always the one making sure everyone else is good. I know you pretend you're fine even when you're not. I know you hate asking for help. I blinked at him. You've been paying attention. He held my gaze. Yeah. There was no hesitation. No awkwardness. Just truth. And that somehow made it harder to breathe. The room felt smaller all of a sudden. Like the air had shifted. Like we'd stepped into something neither of us had planned for. You don't do this for everyone, do you? I asked. A small, almost amused exhale left him. No, he said. I don't. Then why me? That question lingered between us. And for a second, I thought maybe he wouldn't answer. But then he leaned back slightly, eyes still on mine, something softer settling into his expression. I think you already know. I didn't. Or maybe I did, and just didn't want to say it out loud. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It just sat there. Everything unsaid, but understood. And at some point, without really thinking about it, my hand shifted slightly on the bed. Closer to his. I didn't mean to. At least, that's what I told myself. But I didn't move it away either. And neither did he. You should try to sleep again, he said quietly after a while. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I actually could. But I leaned back anyway, letting my head rest against the pillow. Zane? Yeah? Thanks. He didn't respond right away. But I felt it. His hand brushing lightly against mine again. Still there. I've got you, he said. Soft. Certain. And for the first time since the accident, I actually believed it. That night should have just been about recovery. About rest. About getting through a stupid accident. But it wasn't. Because somewhere between hitting the floor and waking up with him still sitting beside me, something had changed. Something I wasn't ready to name yet. But I could feel it. Clear as anything. And the scary part? I wasn't sure I wanted it to stop. Morning came slower than I expected. Not in the peaceful, well-rested kind of way, but in that heavy, groggy way where your body wakes up before your brain does. The first thing I noticed? The light. Too bright again, even through half-closed eyes. The second thing? My head still hurt. Not as bad as before, but enough to remind me that yesterday actually happened. And the third? Zane. Still there. Except this time, he wasn't in the chair. He was leaning forward, elbows on the bed, head resting on his arms, like at some point during the night, the chair just stopped being enough. I stayed still for a second, just looking at him. He looked even more exhausted in the daylight. Like he hadn't really slept at all. Like even when he closed his eyes, part of him stayed awake. Because of me. That thought sat weird in my chest. I shifted slightly, and that was all it took. Tony? His head lifted immediately, voice still rough but alert. Yeah, I said, blinking a few times. Morning. He exhaled like he'd been holding something in. Yeah, morning. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then he straightened up, rubbing the back of his neck. How do you feel? Like I lost a fight, I muttered. He huffed out a quiet breath. Yeah, well, Floor definitely won. I almost smiled. Almost. A doctor came in not long after, ran through the usual checks again. Said I was doing better, but I'd need to take it easy for a few days. No work. No screens for too long. Rest. All that. I nodded through most of it, but honestly, I was barely listening. Because Zane was still there. Still standing off to the side, arms crossed, paying attention to every word like it actually mattered to him. Like I actually mattered to him. When the doctor left, I looked over at him again. You don't have work or something? I asked. He shrugged. Took the day. I frowned. Zane. Don't start. He cut in, but softer this time. I'm serious, I said. You don't need to put your life on hold because I slipped like an idiot. You didn't slip like an idiot, he said, a little sharper now. You got hurt. Same thing. No, it's not. There was a brief silence after that. Not tense. Just real. They're probably gonna discharge you later, he said after a moment, calmer now. Yeah, I replied. That's what he said. You got someone to stay with you? I blinked. What? For the first night, he clarified. They said you shouldn't be alone. Oh, I said, looking away for a second. I'll be fine. Tony. That tone again. Firm. Not aggressive, but not something you ignore either. I said I'll be fine. I repeated. And I said you shouldn't be alone. I sighed, rubbing my face carefully. What do you want me to say? The truth. I hesitated. Because the truth? I didn't really have anyone lined up. Not because I couldn't call someone, but because I didn't want to make it a big deal. Didn't want to need anyone like that. I'll figure it out, I said finally. Zane just stared at me. And yeah, he saw right through that. Or, he said slowly, you could stop being stubborn for 5 minutes. I let out a breath. I'm not being stubborn. You are. I'm not. You literally hit your head and you're still trying to act like you don't need help. That's not. It is. I stopped. Because arguing felt pointless when he was looking at me like that. Like he already knew. Just let me help you, he said, quieter now. And that hit different. Not pushy. Not demanding. Just honest. I looked at him for a second, trying to figure out why this was so hard to accept. Why letting him stay felt like such a big deal. Maybe because I knew it wasn't just about the concussion anymore. Fine, I said eventually, exhaling. What are you suggesting? I'll stay with you, he said. Like it was obvious. Simple. Direct. Like there was no other option in his mind. You don't have to do that, I replied immediately. I know. Zane. I want to. There it was again. That same line. And somehow, it still got to me. You're really not gonna drop this, are you? I asked. He shook his head once. No. I stared at him for another second, then let out a quiet breath. Okay. That was it. That was the moment everything shifted again. Because agreeing to that? Letting him into my space like that? That wasn't small. Okay? He repeated, like he didn't expect me to say yes. Yeah, I said. Okay. Something in his expression softened immediately. Not a big reaction. Just subtle. But I saw it. All right, he said, pushing himself off the wall slightly. Then we'll get you out of here, get you home, and I'll make sure you don't do anything stupid. I smirked faintly. You're enjoying this a little too much. Yeah, he replied without missing a beat. I finally get to boss you around. I shook my head. But for the first time since all this started, things felt a little lighter. Still, as I watched him move around the room, grabbing my stuff, talking to the nurse, handling things like he'd been doing it forever, one thought kept coming back. This wasn't just someone helping out. This wasn't just convenience. This wasn't just timing. Zane chose this. Chose to stay. Chose to be here. Chose me. And I had a feeling. Going home with him? That was where things were really going to change. The ride back to my apartment felt different. Not dramatic. Not intense. Just quiet. Zane was driving, one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually near the gearshift. Every now and then, he'd glance over at me, not in an obvious way, just quick checks. Like he needed to make sure I was still okay. You good? He asked at one red light. I nodded. Yeah. Just tired? Yeah, he said. That's gonna stick around for a bit. I leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes for a second. You sound like you've done this before. Had a friend with a concussion once, he replied. Didn't listen to anyone, tried to go out the same night. I cracked one eye open. And? He threw up in an Uber and got banned. I huffed out a weak laugh. Noted. I'll try to avoid that. Good plan. When we got to my place, everything felt normal. Too normal. Like nothing had happened. Same hallway. Same door. Same slightly annoying flicker in the overhead light I kept meaning to fix. But walking in? That felt different. Because Zane walked in with me. Like he belonged there. And for some reason, that didn't feel as weird as it probably should have. Sit, he said, nodding toward the couch. I raised an eyebrow. You're really leaning into this whole in charge thing, huh? Sit, Tony. There was that tone again. I rolled my eyes, but I sat. Happy? Very, he said, already moving toward the kitchen. You got anything to eat that isn't trash? Wow, I muttered. Rude. I'm serious. He called back, opening cabinets like he'd been there before. You need actual food. I have food. You have chips and whatever this is, he said, holding something up. Instant noodles, I replied. He gave me a look. Exactly. A few minutes later, he somehow managed to put together something semi-decent out of whatever I had left in my fridge. I watched him from the couch, arms loosely folded, still a little out of it, but aware enough to notice how comfortable he looked. Like he wasn't a guest. Like this wasn't temporary. You don't have to do all that, I said. I know, he replied, not even looking up. I want to. That line again. And yeah, it was starting to get to me. When he finally brought the food over, he handed it to me without a word. Eat, he said. Yes, sir, I muttered. He smirked faintly but didn't comment. I took a few bites, realizing halfway through that I was actually starving. See? He said, watching me. You needed that. Don't get used to being right, I replied. Too late. After that, things slowed down. I stayed on the couch, half sitting, half lying down, while Zane moved around the apartment like he was making sure everything was set. Lights dimmed. Water within reach. My phone plugged in. It was small stuff, but it added up. You're hovering, I said at one point. I'm not hovering. You are. I'm observing. I gave him a look. That's just hovering with a better name. That got a quiet laugh out of him. Just making sure you're good. I am good. He hummed, clearly not fully convinced. At some point, the silence settled in again. But like before, it wasn't awkward. Just calm. I leaned my head back, eyes half closed, listening to the faint sounds of the city outside. You can relax, you know, I said after a while. I'm not gonna randomly pass out or something. Yeah, he replied. You already did that part. I snorted lightly. But he didn't laugh this time. Zane, I said, opening my eyes again. Yeah? You're still doing it. Doing what? Watching me like that. He didn't deny it. Didn't even try. Yeah, he said simply. I stared at him for a second. Why? He leaned back slightly in the chair across from me, arms resting on his knees. Because I keep thinking about it. About what? That moment, he said. When you hit the floor. My chest tightened slightly. You're okay now, I said. I know. Then why does it still matter? He looked at me for a second, then exhaled quietly. Because for a second, I thought you weren't gonna get back up. That hit harder than I expected. And the way he said it? Like it wasn't something he could just shake off. I shifted slightly, sitting up a bit more despite the lingering ache in my head. I did get back up, I said. Yeah, he replied, eyes still on me. You did. Still didn't like it. There was something about the way he said that made it hard to look away. Because this wasn't just concern anymore. It was something deeper. Something heavier. And I could feel it pulling at me. Come here, I said before I could overthink it. He frowned slightly. What? Just come here. He hesitated for a second, then stood up and walked over. Slow. Careful. Like he wasn't sure what I was about to do. When he got close enough, I reached out, lightly grabbing his wrist. Not strong. Just enough. He froze. Not pulling away. But definitely not expecting it. You can stop watching me like I'm gonna disappear, I said quietly. I'm right here. For a second, he didn't say anything. Didn't move. Then his gaze dropped briefly to where my hand was on him, before coming back up to meet mine. I know, he said. But he didn't sound fully convinced. My grip loosened slightly, but I didn't let go completely. And he didn't step back. We just stayed there. Closer than before. The space between us smaller than it had ever been. You're still worried? I said. Yeah. Why? He let out a quiet breath. Because I don't think I realized how much I'd notice if you weren't around. There it was. No joke. No deflection. Just truth. And yeah, that did something to me. Zane, I started, not even sure what I was going to say. But whatever it was, it got stuck. Because the way he was looking at me now, it wasn't casual anymore. Not even close. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I wasn't thinking about the accident. At all. I was thinking about him. And how close he was. And how neither of us was moving away. I don't know who moved first. That's the part that still messes with me when I think about it. Because 1 second, we were just standing there, too close, saying things we probably shouldn't have been saying, and the next, something shifted. Not fast. Not reckless. Just inevitable. My hand was still lightly around his wrist when I felt it, his fingers turning slightly, not pulling away, but adjusting, like he was choosing to stay there. Like he wanted to. Tony, he said, quieter now. Not a warning. More like checking. Giving me a chance to stop this before it turned into something else. I didn't. I should have, maybe. But I didn't. Instead, I tightened my grip just slightly, not enough to trap him, just enough to make it clear. I'm not letting go. His eyes dropped to our hands again, then back up to mine. And yeah, that was it. That was the moment everything tipped. You sure? He asked. It wasn't about my head anymore. We both knew that. I swallowed, my chest feeling tighter than it had all day. Yeah, I said. And I meant it. He stepped in closer. Slow enough that I could have backed away if I wanted to. I didn't. The space between us disappeared completely, and suddenly I was very aware of everything. His height, the warmth coming off him, the way his breathing had changed just slightly. My hand slid from his wrist to his arm without thinking. Still light. Still testing. But definitely not neutral anymore. Tell me if... He started. I will. I cut in. I wasn't going to. But I said it anyway. There was a pause. One last second where we just looked at each other. And then, he leaned in. Not rushed. Not hesitant either. Just steady. Like he'd already made up his mind. The first contact was barely anything. Just a brush. Testing. But it was enough to send something sharp through my chest. Something real. I didn't pull back. Neither did he. And the second time? It wasn't a question anymore. It felt different than I expected. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming. Just right. Like something that had been building quietly finally found its way out. His hand moved to my side, careful, like he was still aware of everything, still holding back just enough. And mine didn't know where to go at first. Then it settled against him, gripping lightly like I needed something solid to hold on to. When we pulled back, it wasn't far. Just enough to look at each other again. And yeah, everything had changed. No going back to, just casual, after that. Not even close. You okay? He asked, voice low. I nodded, even though my head was spinning for a completely different reason now. Yeah. A small breath left him, something between relief and disbelief. Okay. But he didn't step away. And neither did I. This is probably a bad idea, I said, even though I wasn't moving. Yeah, he agreed. Still not moving either. I let out a quiet breath. And we're still doing it. Yeah. There was the faintest hint of a smile on his face now. And that made it worse. Or better. I wasn't sure yet. Your head, he said after a second, glancing at me more seriously now. We should. I'm fine, I replied. You keep saying that. Because I am. He looked like he didn't fully believe me, but he didn't push it this time. Not right now. Instead, his hand shifted slightly, more secure now, less hesitant. And mine stayed where it was. Because at this point, pulling away would have felt wrong. You realize this changes things, I said. I know. And you're okay with that? He didn't hesitate. Yeah. That answer came too fast to be fake. Too certain to ignore. I studied his face for a second, then nodded slightly. Okay. That was it. No big speech. No overthinking. Just, okay. Because the truth was, I felt it too. That same shift. That same pull. That same something. And as we stood there, still too close, still not quite ready to step back into whatever normal was supposed to be, one thing was clear. This wasn't about the accident anymore. Not even a little. It started with a fall. But it didn't end there. Not even close. The thing about moments like that? They don't come with instructions. There's no clear what now? No smooth transition back into reality. Just two people standing too close, knowing something changed, and not quite sure how to move forward without breaking it. Zane was the first to step back. Not far. Just enough to breathe. Not enough to create distance. You should sit, he said, softer now, like he was grounding both of us again. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. Yeah, probably. The moment stretched for a second longer, then I turned and dropped back onto the couch. And just like that, reality crept back in. My head still hurt. My body still felt off. But now there was something else layered on top of it. Something heavier. Something real. Zane didn't go back to the chair this time. He sat beside me. Close, but not touching. Not yet. You feeling dizzy? He asked after a second. I shook my head slightly. No, just tired. Good, he said. You should rest. I glanced at him. You're still in caretaker mode, huh? He huffed quietly. You literally have a concussion, Tony. Yeah. But I didn't argue. Because part of me liked it. The silence that followed was different again. Not tense. Not uncertain. Just full. Like there was more to say, but neither of us needed to rush it. I leaned my head back, closing my eyes for a second. Hey, he said. I opened one eye. Yeah? You regret it? Straight to the point. That was very Zane. I studied him for a second. He looked calm, but there was something underneath it. Waiting. Not insecure, just needing to know. No, I said. Honest. Immediate. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Good, he said. Then, after a beat, me neither. I let out a small breath, looking away for a second before leaning my head back again. Still kind of insane timing though, I muttered. He smirked faintly. Yeah. You almost knock yourself out, and that's when we figure this out. Romantic, I said dryly. Very. We both laughed a little. And for the first time since all of this started, it felt easy. A few minutes passed like that. Quiet. Comfortable. Until I felt it. His hand. Lightly resting against mine on the couch. Not grabbing. Not asking. Just there. Like before. But this time? I didn't even hesitate. I turned my hand slightly, letting our fingers settle together naturally. And he didn't pull away. You're staying, right? I asked quietly. I already knew the answer. But I wanted to hear it. Yeah, he said. Simple. Certain. I told you I would. I nodded slightly. Good. We'll figure it out, he added. I glanced at him. Figure what out? This, he said, motioning lightly between us. Whatever this is. I exhaled slowly. Yeah, I said. We will. And for once, that didn't stress me out. It didn't feel complicated. It didn't feel like something I had to control. It just felt like something I wanted to see through. Get some sleep, he said after a while. You're really not gonna stop saying that, are you? Nope. I rolled my eyes slightly, but shifted anyway, settling more comfortably into the couch. You better still be here when I wake up, I muttered. He looked at me, really looked at me, and something softened again. I will, he said. No hesitation. No doubt. And yeah, that was enough. I don't remember falling asleep that time, but I remember the feeling. His hand still in mine. The quiet of the apartment. The steady, grounded presence of someone who chose to stay. It started with an accident. A stupid fall. A moment I couldn't control. But somehow, that moment brought me exactly where I needed to be. Right there. On that couch. With him. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to pull away from it. I wasn't overthinking it. I wasn't pretending it didn't matter. I just let it happen. And honestly, that was the part that changed everything.